Hello, everybody. We are here on the Quantum Industry Day afternoon session, session E, and you're all welcome to the quantum sensing sensor session with Jacques and George as last year, standing this time, but we'll be happy to guide you through a very interesting afternoon session with a lot of live company tours at the end. So please stay tuned till 5 o'clock. Afterwards, of course, you can join the apéro. But now we first go to the first part, where we have two talks in the next hour. And the first one, I'm happy to introduce you Katja Glass from Rohde Schwarz, together with her colleague Melvyn Oy. And they will be giving us a very interesting perspective in the way Rohde Schwarz will handle and does handle innovation in a market which is very vivid, the quantum market. And the quantum market, as you all know, has its own rules. So I'm happy to introduce you, Katja and Melvyn. The floor is yours.
Just before that, just one comment from my side for the attendees. Sorry for that. Just please use the question and answer feature at the bottom of Zoom to ask your questions. We will read the questions at the end of the talks. So please use it. Otherwise, we will have to ask the questions, but perhaps you have some, so do so. So Katja, you can share your screen and the floor is yours.
Perfect. Thank you. And hello and welcome from Munich. First, a big thank you to the organizers of this conference for inviting us. And I can just add on, yes, please ask us questions. Use this. We're very happy to get into discussion with you. Okay, but first, I want to introduce myself a little. My name is Katja Glass. I'm working for corporate R&D within Rohde Schwarz, and I'm leading the corporate innovation department. With me is my colleague, Dr. Melvyn Oy, who's going to introduce himself a little later in more detail. But just a few words on this note. Melvyn is responsible within our innovation department for coordinating and managing our cooperation with Uni Basel and Professor Treutlein there. And we're having a project with them together on quantum sensing. And this is also why we're here today in this conference invited to share a little bit more on transferring new technologies from research to industry. And how is that actually for us from industry perspective? So once more note on myself, please don't expect me to give any technical insights because I'm not a physicist and I don't have a quantum technology background. I still hope that there will be some insights for you. On this, just my slides not working. Let me see. Now it is. Okay, I want to start to give you a bit of a context about Rohde Schwarz first. So we have three main business divisions that and markets that we are looking at. First, most of you will probably know from laboratories and universities our test and measurement products, our oscilloscopes, our spectrum analyzers, our signal generators. Secondly, we have a business unit, technology systems, where we test mobile networks. But additionally, we're not only doing this, we're also active in the field of securing communications and have a business in critical infrastructure. And last but not least, we are active in the field of networks and cybersecurity, and are offering network security solutions and network solutions to our customers there. Some of you may question yourself, isn't there something missing? So I'm very happy to also mention at this note that Zurich Instruments is now a Rohde Schwarz company. And as you probably know, Zurich Instruments is providing a lot of solutions for quantum computing and also other quantum needs. And perhaps the important note here is nothing changes. So there's a very strong, of course, getting together of Zurich Instruments and Rohde Schwarz. And we want to offer you the best solutions we have there for your needs in the field of quantum technology. And I just want to add on here a quote of our COO, Peter Riedel, who said, Rohde Schwarz and Zurich Instruments already share a passion for advancing science and innovation. But today here, I don't want to talk so much about our passion for advancing science. I want to talk more about our passion about advancing innovation. And this is why we are here today giving this talk. So what does that mean? Corporate innovation, what do we do as an innovation department within Rohde Schwarz? Just a few words on this. Innovation is actually a mindset. And the point here is that we, and this is our mission within the companies, is we need to match ideas to business concerns. Of course, as a corporate company in industry, this is our higher goal to make business with the solutions that we offer. And that means for us as a corporate innovation department that we need to identify the right use cases that are relevant for our customers out there and really understand their customer needs. And therefore, what does that mean for the technology that we're using? So what is the implications of the customer needs on the requirements we have and which kind of technology actually we're applying? Because sometimes there's multiple options what technology to use. Just to share a little bit more about our work here, Rohde Schwarz innovators pitch their ideas to our management board. They have 8 minutes, it's not a lot of time. And some of our guys really, they need to work hard to bring also technology down to a customer benefit fit within 8 minutes to convince our management board. And then we need to work out the business opportunity here. And this specific business case will be considered in terms of numbers a little later, because from an innovation point of view, sometimes it's not so good to ask for business numbers right away, as you might probably know. So it's important to see where's an opportunity and what can be enabled with certain technology to make progress in the end for us, for our customers. By this, I want to get back to quantum techniques and what that means for us from the corporate innovation department. So we are looking specifically on quantum technologies, how we can apply this within our products to then give this to our customers in the end. And the point why we as an innovation department are involved here is because Rohde Schwarz is an RF company. And so far, if we leave certain instruments out and just look at the core business Rohde Schwarz had so far, I would not say that we are the quantum experts. And therefore, it's especially important for us that we work very closely with research institutes, with universities, because there has lately been a lot of progress in this field. And we now need to understand what does that mean for us as an industry company, and how can we apply this in the end, and what do we need to learn along the way that we can give a benefit to our customers by the end of the day. Our customers, of course, well, they will not care so much what kind of technology is within their products to fulfill their needs, but we want to give them the best result. And I think there's a lot of potential lying in quantum technologies to also give benefit to our customers out there. And by this, I would hand over here to my colleague, Melvyn, to share a little more, because Melvyn actually is a very interesting position. He is coming from research. He was before doing his PhD at Uni Basel as well. And he transferred over to Rohde Schwarz, and I'm sure he will share a little bit about his own struggles also that he had coming from research and accepting also our corporate mindset here and how we look at technology, what is also a little bit different perhaps. And by that, I'm very happy that we have him on the team, because this is an important role to fill, to be the bridge here between the company and the institutes. And by this, I think, Melvyn, I leave the rest for you.
So hi, everyone. Thanks, Katja. Indeed, so we are looking at quantum technologies in a way that gives our customers a better solution. Talking about this transition and the difficulty of seeing two sides, a bit about myself at this point. So I began my quantum career in Singapore, actually, in the Center of Quantum Technologies, working with Valerio Scarani on the topic of device-independent quantum information. So these are important keywords. You have to write down the right keywords when you send up a manuscript, right? So, and thereafter I went to Uni Basel, working in the team of Nicolas Sangua, and there new keywords, looking more deeply into optics, other bell tests, single photon sources in quantum networks, and also a short stint in Uni Geneva. So there you also see some overlap with the Swiss science. I was very glad to be part of that. But this is the keywords you need to think of when you are doing your scientific work. However, in 2019, I got a chance to join Rohde Schwarz. And well, here, I think you'd recognize the keywords in this world are very, very different. Yes, we can consider new tools and new ways to do things. You can have keywords like RF, you can have keywords like digital processing, but actually the change here for me was to consider customer concerns, again, use cases, and the possibilities of new technology. So very, very different focus, very, very different mindset. And I would say that these are, I think there can be a transition, but it's not naturally automatic, right? So here, what is this, with this transition, what makes it so interesting? Is it completely at odds? And I think here we'd like to point out that collaborating between universities and industry can be very, very interesting. As most of us know here, research units or research organizations they are pushing the boundaries all the time. They're asking what can be done, even going a step broader, how to even understand the field in the first place, or what is the newest, best approach to solve something. And here, I think very naturally, we all know the goal is knowledge creation and spreading of this information and scientific advancement. But industry brings something else. What we want to do is to give solutions to customer problems and to address their concerns. So of course, what we would appreciate very much here is exploring new technologies and to assess them, and to also bring these assessments towards considering how customer use cases can be addressed. So we can find a win-win here if parties come together and we do technology transfer, know-how back and forth on not just the science, but on the customer needs and the profiles here. So when we come together, is everything, say, a rosy situation as is painted on this slide? I think not automatically. Some questions still remain. We always have questions like, how long is the technology valid? Using certain techniques to solve problems, maybe not the only way for a very, very long time. You start to ask, this solution, can it be produced at scale, reliably, perhaps? Serviceability, how difficult is it to service in the field, in the hands of the customer? Going on further and further, is it a reasonable cost for production? What kind of environmental conditions can you work under? And even further, right, the questions don't stop. How often do you need to service it? Does the customer need specific knowledge? For example, we have lasers all the time. Does the customer need to know how to operate the laser? And going on to the obvious obvious questions like power consumption, size and weight constraints, and on and on. So right now, as it stands, of course, many of these questions can be very difficult to answer and difficult to scope when you're looking at new technologies. But our point here is as follows. Yes, we eventually need to face these questions, but in a new exploration, our mindset is that not everything has to be completely answered right now. Rather, we see this as a journey. We are not saying that these eventual questions can be ignored. We're saying that we need to get there. But then now is the golden question, now is the crux of it. If these questions are remaining, what is the right way to see how these questions can be addressed? How can this great technology reach people at some point? And so we propose to look at it, once again, you hear this phrase over and over again, from the eyes of a use case. So going on the topic of RF, we are a company with core competency in radio frequency technology. So you just consider a sensor that's very attractive, perhaps very sensitive in the RF bands, right? And let's consider now an air traffic control scenario. You want to very safely and reliably bring planes in and out. And along the way, they have always air traffic communications that say, yes, I'm such and such a plane, I'm going here and there. But how to make this better? How to remove the ambiguity of knowing which plane is transmitting at which point of time? So actually, there are solutions which are direction finding and getting the location of the transmitting aircraft. And I think you recognize here that just because the sensor is very sensitive, it does not mean that you know where the aircraft is. You need a directionality when you look at this solution. So what I'm trying to say is that from the use case here, you have concerns that impact the technology that you use and the eventual need that needs to be addressed. Of course, not everything is obvious. So I show also a picture where we assisted the DFS to install such DF antennas around their site. And because of the height requirement to be above the trees, some creative methods need to be employed, right? But this is the thing that comes with addressing customer needs. Not only is the technology required, but the way in which it's employed also comes into play. Let's go a bit further in. We talked about air traffic control. Let's go into the airport now, and we consider an airport indoor interference scenario. So people are sipping coffee, they have Wi-Fi, something's interfering. How can you deal with it? So, well, actually here, then you would need a whole different kind of solution for the customer need. You would have, for example, a need for portable handheld receiver antennas for interference hunting. And then now the size and weight concerns are completely different. We're talking about a portable man-held device with an instant update on screen, right? And I think you can see from the way it's designed, the handle and so on, comfort, ergonomics are very important as well. So the whole picture has changed. You can have a sensitive RF receiver, right? But this is a whole different solution, right? The usability concerns are completely different. So that's just an example here. In our own way, as we look into quantum technologies, we reached out to Basel, and we are very glad to have a win-win. Of course, now, once I said before, it was an exploration. This all remains the case, but we realized that looking at our core competencies in RF, we looked at the group of Philip Trotline in Basel, and we saw Andrew Horsley's previous work for field imaging with atomic vapor cells. Broadly, the statement is this: it could provide an alternative way to sense RF signals and be relevant to many use cases. Of course, we don't have a fixed one at this early stage, but once again, the keyword for us is this: there are many, many customer needs that involve RF. Could this be a way forward? So here it's very nice for us to find a win-win scenario between two sides, and that's the reason why we embark on a collaboration. So we're very glad to have this. Right. Now, maybe I close off with this example. I think many of us use lasers, and we always think of Einstein when we have our bachelor lessons on stimulated emission. But I'd like to point to Theodore Maimon, who made the first working prototype of a ruby laser, and famously said, maybe not super accurately in the phrasing, but he said, a laser is a solution in search of a problem. So he worked very hard to expand not just his initial prototype, but also look around for applications. And today, where are we now? We have lasers in barcode scanners, we have laser printers, range finders, and of course, no stranger to all of us, the lasers you have on the lab optical bench. So my point here is this. Of course, I keep talking about use cases, and this is an insight from the company view, but use cases are nothing without the technology that empowers this. So I want to just say, if you are in the lab pushing research ahead, keep going. This is inspiration for you. And as we always say in Rohde Schwarz, let's make these ideas real. Right. So thank you very much. And maybe I think we should accept some questions.
Thank you, Melvyn. Thank you, Kat. This is really a very inspiring talk, and it's nice to see the RF community, which I used to know since quite a while. Rohde Schwarz is a name in the RF community, entered in this market by acquiring Zurich Instrument. This is a huge step, I think, for Rohde Schwarz, but it's also nice to see how you also connect to University of Basel, where QCIT has a long-standing tradition, and this development which you showed in Treutland Group is very, very impressive, and I think it's an interesting path. And I would have myself a few questions if we don't have yet.
We just remind the attendee that you can ask questions in the question and answer feature at the bottom of the Zoom. But first, go on with your first question, and then we go back to the attendee ones.
Thank you, Jacques. My first question would be, do you think there is a possibility to replace a standard vector network analyzer at one point with a more quantum device, which is a little bit more compact and perhaps better in feature? What could be the proposition and what could be the benefits in turning the old traditional vector network analyzer into a new one, quantum one?
So maybe I have to caution everyone. I say I'm a theorist at this point, but based on my understanding, I think that is a good question, because like I see the complexity with multiple ports, seeing how they interface together as a very nice end goal. I feel that in an exploration, we start from a lower TRL level, keeping all this complexity and use case in mind. As you said, a network analyzer is something someone needs for sure, right? But here, I think we can go step by step while keeping an open view. We can have, of course, miniaturization at some point. But here, I think we want to make sure naturally that there is a response in a certain electronic environment and so on. So there's interfaces that need to be considered. And yeah, so I can't say for sure. It's very exciting nonetheless.
Yeah, what perhaps I can share here a bit is that Rohde Schwarz is getting ready to actually implement and use quantum effects and quantum technology in our products. But also we are an RF company, and it will take a bit of a time, and we will need to do some projects with some university to learn for ourselves and to transfer know-how, and by the end also understand how we can apply quantum technology and to which of our product portfolio, but actually not to our product portfolio, but how we can actually give a benefit to our customers out there by the end of the day. So we're not here the business and domain experts, but we're the linkage to the rest of the company to start evaluating how we can use this technology for ourselves. And that's why we start together with Uni Basel with our quantum sensing project here.
Thanks, Katja. I would have also perhaps one question which is more related to what we discussed already this morning. Perhaps some of you attended the morning session. It's about CH being banned from the Horizon Europe quantum course. Could you tell me, so we discussed this morning about the impact for Switzerland as RTOs or SMEs. And now I would like to have your perspective. How do you see for your developments the fact that we are not able to collaborate in the frame of Horizon Europe with you, for example?
Should I start crying? Do you see my tears here? I need to, like, I can cry out loud. I don't know what to do. What a question. This is, like, to us, it's really an immense impact, because we would be very happy to join in a consortium with you guys together. And I think this is very important for us as an industry to transfer knowledge, right? We need time, and we need a certain frame to actually learn as industry what is doable and what kind of expertise we also need to build up in our company. And I don't know what to say, and I really hope that this is going to change and that we will have an opportunity to work together on a research project soon.
Yeah. One of the idea of this morning's session was mentioned by Oliver Ambacher from the Fraunhofer. That's, yeah, sure, there will be a gap of 2-3 years for such collaboration for Swiss entities. We'll try to set up bilateral interaction between different countries like Switzerland, Germany, Switzerland, France, Switzerland, UK, for example, because there are national initiatives that have good funding opportunities, and we have just to set up kind of a frame that allows, let's say, Switzerland to collaborate with Germany, for example. Let's say this is the action that we have to take. Perhaps on your side, we have one question here. Perhaps you can read it.
Yes, a question from...
One comment regarding collaborating. I think that in the field of quantum technologies, there's so much specific know-how that there's, like, for us from a corporate point of view, we don't have a huge variety of experts that we can choose, because I think there's a lot of specific know-how, and therefore it's really important that we also have the possibility to work together with Switzerland and with Swiss researchers.
Melvyn, there is a question, very specific question from Nick Vestiuk. He is asking if there is a proposition for the vapor cell imaging, which is more into the OTA testing as over the air or anechoic chamber, or some other scenarios, which could be the most successful, or the first one you would address from Rohde and Schwarz?
We don't have this assessment so far. So we just began. We've had early results, of course, promising from the start, but nowhere enough to fix down a use case. So we don't really close the door right now. OTA testing, yes, I believe that you might think of sensing the RF near an antenna of some kind, finding out the image in tree space. Yes, this is generally something we are interested in. But as for real tests, well, this is still a long ways to go.
And I think also here at the moment, it's important that our company learns about what is possible to do with this technology. Therefore, we as a company need to evaluate for ourselves, like, what can we do, and where's perhaps limits, and we need to, and this is really a nice setting we have right now together with Uni Basel, to learn what many of you perhaps already know out there. But as Rohde & Schwarz is not a quantum experts company so far, this is steps that we have to take now to actually take over and transfer knowledge from research, and then we can go and evaluate in more specifics the specific use cases that we can apply.
So to say something on that, we don't go into this saying like, oh, there is one use case, and if it does not match, then we stop the whole thing completely. This is not the mindset which we want to enter into exploration. Not just by ourselves, but especially not with a partner. This is not being so flexible and open. I think we should go into this seeing this technology platform for what it is, and also just mentally testing it on use cases as we go along.
Thank you, Melvyn, and thank you also, Katja, for the insights, especially the way you see the innovation in this new market, in the quantum market. 5 years ago, when I entered the lab of Professor Treutland, I was also thinking this vapor cell could be something of interest for Rohde and Schwarz, and this is like, it's really amazing to see now that you have the right people in the right space, and you try to see what could be the next products you will improve by using this technology coming from the lab. Thanks again.
Thank you. We're ready to go this path.
All the best on the way.
If I can just comment, so we were in contact, Katja and Melvyn. We are so happy to have Rohde and Schwarz integrating the quantum field, and that you start collaboration with our team in macQsimal, for example, or beside macQsimal. And this is really appreciated, and we really hope that will continue in this way.
Thank you. The same from us.
And with that, we thank again Rohde and Schwarz, and we move on to the next presentation, which is going to be the presentation. We have a small glitch, but we have the next presentation is Janine Riedrich-Moeller. She's coming from Robert Bosch. She's also coming from the research, entering a very interesting and innovative research group in the quantum field of sensing. We connect to Robert Bosch since beginning of the Quantum Industry Day, and with each year we are happy to see the evolution, and also the evolution in miniaturization in the direction of handheld devices at one point, and perhaps Janine will show us more on the quantum sensors and the challenges and the changes.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. Let me share my screen. Okay, and now large screen. Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Janine Riedrich-Moeller. I'm working for Bosch Corporate Research near Stuttgart, and I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to share our approaches on quantum sensors and the prototypes that we are realizing here at Bosch Research in the framework today on the Quantum Industry Day in Switzerland. Before I go more into detail and talk about our quantum sensors, let me briefly introduce the Bosch Group. So the Bosch Group is active in 4 business sectors. The largest one is mobility solutions with a share of sales of 60%. And the other business sectors are industrial technology, energy and building technology, and consumer goods. So maybe you know our household products or our power tools. In 2020, the sales revenue has been more than 70 billion euro. And more than or approximately 400,000 associates are working for Bosch worldwide. 73,000 associates are working in research development, and among them 34,000 are software developers. And Bosch invests 5.9 billion euro in research and development. And in 2015, Bosch decided to concentrate their research activities on one location, and they built a research campus for Bosch at Renningen near Stuttgart in Germany. And here, me and my colleagues are working on various fields, ranging from artificial intelligence to robotics to battery research and even to quantum technology. And this research campus was an invest of 310 million euro. Approximately 1,400 associates are working here in 400 laboratories and 14 buildings. And as I said, Bosch is active in quantum technologies since several years. And we have several research activities. So we have one activity on quantum cryptography, where my colleagues develop a quantum random number generator as a support technology for the Internet of Things. Other colleagues of mine are working on quantum computing, with a special focus to develop algorithms, for example, for material simulations or to solve complex and so far unsolvable engineering tasks. And my colleagues and me, we are working in the field of quantum sensors. So here we would like to sustain the leading position of Bosch in the sensor business by utilizing atomic quantum states instead of artificial MEMS structures. So instead of artificial micromechanical structures that are typically used to realize a sensor. And in our team, we are focusing on 2 products, on 2 applications. The first one are magnetometers, and the second one are gyroscopes. And now I would like to go more into detail and talk about our sensors. So for the first sensors, these magnetometers, we are using defect sensors in diamonds. So we have here the nitrogen vacancy center, which is called. So we have a nitrogen atom and a vacancy next to it that sits here or is integrated in the carbon lattice of a diamond. This defect is negatively charged, and it's sensitive to magnetic fields. It can be optically excited, read out, and so you can detect the magnetic field using this, this sensor, this optical active defect sensor. And the sensitivity for these sensors has been reported down to 1 picotesla per square root hertz, which is really impressive. The other product and application is a gyroscope. So here we are using the spin in an atomic gas to sense the rotation rate of objects with really high precision. And the technique we are using is referred as nuclear magnetic resonance. So therefore we call this gyroscope also nuclear magnetic resonance gyroscope, or briefly atomic gyroscope. And there has been a lot of publications about very impressive sensitivities in all these 2 fields by universities, by institutes. But when it comes to industrialization, there are several challenges that are remaining. And the first one is probably downsizing the system to a small package. then of course to scale up the production to high volume and to have a competitive cost structure. And this is our main challenges we are focusing on. So we want to combine the impressive sensitivity of these quantum sensing principle together with the approaches of industrialization these products. And so this might leverage the application to the next level. This is the promise. And so now I would like to talk briefly or to talk more in detail about our two products and our two research applications. And let me start with the nitrogen vacancy-based diamond magnetometer. So when we come to leveraging applications to the next level, here is a comparison of state-of-the-art or existing technology for the magnetometer. Here on the left, we have the Hall, the Fluxgate, AMR, TMR magnetometers. As you see here, we have sensitivities below 1 microtesla per square root hertz down to tens of nanotesla per square root hertz. And when you might think of, yeah, this is a guess, but when you want to extrapolate these sensitivities within the next year, then you might think of, okay, you might end up in the range of some few or below 1 nanotesla of sensitivity. Now, when you think of new applications, like for example, indoor localization, heart monitoring, neurosurgery instrumentation, or even a brain-machine interface or brain-computer interface. As you see here, you need sensitivities in the range of tens of picotesla down to 1 picotesla or even below 1 picotesla. And this is the interesting range where the NV Center has a sensitivity down to 1 picotesla, and therefore we think that it's interesting to have a look at these NV Center-based diamond magnetometers. How does it work, the NV Center? So actually it's an artificial atom that is located in a solid state matrix. It has discrete energy level. It has here a spin triplet ground state. It has an excited state and here an intermediate state. You can excite the system via green laser light. You can initialize the system optically. You can read out the system optically. Depending on the spin state, you have more or less fluorescence. And what it's interesting that this state here is splitting up when an external magnetic field is applied. And this splitting is proportional to the magnetic field. So when you apply now a microwave field and when it hits a resonance, then you see a dip in the fluorescence. So what you do, you sweep your microwave frequency and the distance here between these two dips, this is proportional to the magnetic field, and gamma is constant, the gyromagnetic ratio, which is well known. And so the benefits of the NV Center is that it's working at room temperature, you have a large dynamic range, and you can do vector magnetometry. That means you can sense the magnetic fields in 3 directions. And what is also interesting is that you can measure simultaneously the magnetic field and the temperature. So what you need when you realize a diamond-based magnetometer, of course, you need the diamond of high quality with NV centers inside. You need a microwave generator near to the diamond via a strip line or a resonator. Of course, you need a light source, a laser at green, at 530, 520 nanometers to excite the NV centers. Then you collect the fluorescence, you filter out the excitation light, and you detect it via photodetector. Typically, we are using a second photodetector to monitor the laser light on a reference detector, and then you have a readout circuit and signal processing to deduce the magnetic field or the temperature and the temperature. And signal processing you can also use to control or to have a feedback and control feedback back to the microwave field generator. So you have a closed loop operation. The minimal detectable magnetic field, this is determined by the dip that you see in the fluorescence, and the line width of this dip, this depends here on the quality of your diamond. And the contrast here of this dip, this is also inversely proportional to the minimal detectable magnetic field. And a second or the third parameter is the photon rate. So this is in the limit of photon shot noise, and the photon rate, that means that you need a laser source with sufficient intensity. Now here you see the progress of our prototypes that have been developed over the last years. So this is a publication in 2019, which is a sugar cube sized prototype that contains all the components. Here the excitation was done using an LED, a green LED, and this prototype reaches a sensitivity of 3 nanotesla per square root hertz. Then this year we published this prototype here. We exchanged the LED by a laser source that was external, and we channeled the excitation light via an optical fiber to our sensor head. And here you see a closer look of this fiber-based prototypes that we realized this year. So here at the center, we have the diamond with the NV sensors. Then we have here the optical fiber for the green excitation light. And beneath the diamond, we have here the photodetectors with the optical filters on top of it. And here we have the connector for the microwave generator. And on this PCB, we have then the readout circuits with the frequency modulation or the simultaneous excitation of different ESR resonances and the closed loop operation. By the way, this sensor reaches a sensitivity of 0.3 nanotesla per square root hertz. So you see the evolvement that also the sensitivity was decreased over the years. The sensitivity was improved over the years, so sorry. So up to now, the realized prototypes, they were built by discrete components that were aligned and that were brought together on a PCB to realize a compact prototype. However, when you look in the future and go to really miniaturized sensors, then CMOS integration is one route to go. And there has been an interesting publication by the Dirk Englund group in 2019 from the MIT, where they already integrated an on-chip microwave generator below the diamond with the NV sensors, and then they had optical filters and also the photodetectors integrated on one chip. And with their published prototype, they realized a sensitivity of 30 microtesla per square root hertz. And this is not the end, so there might be a further integration possible, also integrating the laser drivers or the generator of the static magnetic field. But this is somehow my last slide and the outlook of this first product type we are following. So to use CMOS integration to go really to very compact sensors in the end. And now I would like to do a very sharp cut and come to the second product and second application, which is the gyroscope, the atomic gyroscope that uses the spin in an atomic gas to sense the rotation rate of objects using the technique of nuclear magnetic resonance. And we really think that inertial sensors are a key component for future mobility solutions. So for example, when you think of positioning using dead reckoning, that means positioning using a previously known position, and then you use the data of accelerometers or gyroscope to determine a new position. And here inertial measurement units and gyroscopes comes into play and play an important role. And the future mobility solution, this is a broad range of applications. So you have automotive application, but also avionic or even space application you can think of. And there has been an interesting publication in 2016 by Northrop Grumman, where they published a prototype of these atomic nuclear magnetic resonance gyroscopes, and they reported a sensitivity which was really impressive, better than MEMS gyroscopes, and therefore we decided to also look into this direction. And for gyroscopes, the sensitivity is measured by 2 parameters, typically the angle random walk and the bias instability, and the smaller these values, the better is the sensitivity. And here you see a comparison of state-of-the-art gyroscopes. So here you have the price per axis of an inertial measurement unit, and here is the bias instability. And this is adopted by a Yole report in 2015. And here we have the MEMS gyroscopes, which have a good sensitivity. They are at low cost and they are at small size. In contrast to this, we have the laser, the optical gyroscope, laser-based gyroscope, and optical fiber-based gyroscopes. They have a much better sensitivity, but they are also very expensive and very bulky. And we expect that the atomic gyroscope to be somewhere in between, to have a sensitivity between MEMS and optical gyroscopes, but at lower cost and at smaller size compared to the optical gyroscopes. And especially when you combine the very good reported sensitivity with the possibility of miniaturization, especially when you combine this with MEMS technology, then you can really go to a very interesting product. Okay, how does it work now, the gyroscope based on an atomic spin? So we have here our atomic spin that is associated with a magnetic moment, and you place this in a static magnetic field. And on this system, a torque acts now, and the spin starts to rotate about the static magnetic field. This precession here is referred as the Larmor precession, and the frequency is very characteristic. This Larmor precession or frequency is just proportionate to the static magnetic field, and gamma is the gyromagnetic ratio. This is actually a constant, and this depends on the atomic species that you're using here. So the black formula is for a system at rest. Now, when it starts to rotate, then this angular rate omega r, this adds up to the intrinsic Larmor frequency. And so by measuring this Larmor frequency and by controlling very well the static magnetic field you apply, you can deduce the angular external rate. So this is the basic idea to realize a gyroscope using atomic spins in hot vapor. And this is more or less the principle we are implementing this. So in reality, we don't using just one gas, but we are using a gas mixture. We are using xenon, the noble gas, the nuclear spin of xenon to measure the rotation rate. And we are using rubidium as an auxiliary gas for optical initialization and for readout. So basically you have in red the rubidium and blue the xenon, and they exchange via magnetic field and via spin collisions. So we have here a circular polarized pump beam to align first the rubidium in this static magnetic field. Then you have spin collisions between rubidium and xenon that also aligns the xenon in the static magnetic field. And then we use this AC magnetic field to coherently drive the xenon spins. And then we have a macroscopic magnetization of the xenon spins. And this picture is very similar to this very principle idea here. So in this stage, the xenon is sensitive to an external rotation rate. And for reading out, this is again via the rubidium. We use a weak probe beam and we use Faraday rotation to detect the precision of the xenon rubidium mixture here. The setup looks more or less like this. So here at the center, we have a vapor cell that contains all the gases, the xenon, the rubidium, and a buffer gas. And here you see an example of vapor cells that we have investigated. So here we see glass-blown vapor cells of different shapes that were fabricated and filled by the University of Neuchâtel within the EU project macQsimal. And here you see vapor cells that were fabricated by MEMS technology using microelectromechanical systems technology that were fabricated by CSEM, also within the project macQsimal. They consist of a glass silicon glass stack, and in the silicon you have trenched here a chamber that is filled with rubidium, xenon, and buffer gas, and it's sealed via glass wafers on top and beneath. And this vapor cell here is now centered at the center of our setup. You have a triaxial coil around it, and you have a magnetic shielding to avoid stray magnetic fields at the center of the vapor cell. And then, of course, you have a pump laser light, a probe laser, and you have here the optical detection via a balance detector, lock-in amplification, and the coil driver for your system. And this is how it looks like, or this is the basic idea that we want to have realized by the end of the project, by the end of this year. This is like a shoebox size demonstrator that should contain all the components that you need. So you have here, for example, the magnetic shielding. These are mu metal cylinders that are stacked into one another with the coils inside. And here at the center of the shielding, you have such a vapor cell that is positioned here at the center. Then we need a compact laser source that we develop together, or that is provided by Qnami, a partner which we are collaborating in our project Milliquant. And of course, you need optical components. These are standard components for the moment, like a detector for the pump laser and for the probe laser. And of course, you need electronics for readout and for signal processing and feedback. So this is a shoebox size demonstrator that should be capable to detect the rotation rate by the end of this year. Okay, and last year we already achieved a milestone towards this realization. So we managed to measure the nuclear spin precession of our xenon atoms. So they were initialized, the precession were initialized, and then it freely decays. So at 0 time, the precession initialized. You see here this precession. This is really the precession of the nuclear spin that is detected by the laser light, and the amplitude decays after a few seconds. And when you look at the Fourier transform, you see very pronounced peaks that are attributed to 2 xenon isotopes, 131, 129, that are included in our vapor cells. And here in this measurement, a static magnetic field of 1 microtesla was applied. So we measure this frequency here together with the gyromagnetic ratio and the magnetic field of 1 microtesla. You really end up by this measured frequency. So it really is in very good agreement with the expected frequencies here. And the decay times or the coherence times are in the range of 2.4 to 5.8 seconds, which is pretty good. We also back up our experiment via a system model. So this is a system model using MATLAB Simulink. So here we have the physical model included of the 2 xenon isotopes of rubidium, of the optical detection and of the driving fields. And we use this system model to develop our electronic feedback and the signal processing for our sensor. And with this, I would like to thank our collaborations. We are incorporated in various projects. So here we have the EU-funded quantum flagship projects. We have one project Asterix for the NB centers, and we have one project macQsimal on the miniaturized atomic vapor cells, where we develop together with partners the atomic gyroscopes. For example, here in the project, we are collaborating with CSEM and with the University of Neuchâtel in Switzerland. Then we also included in other national funded projects like the BrainQSense and Quamapolis for the NB centers, and the Milliquant project, where we look at compact laser sources for quantum sensors, especially for magnetometry and for the gyroscopes. And with this, I kindly thank you for your attention, and I'm really happy to answer your questions. Thank you very much.
Hi, Janine. So thank you very, very much for this very interesting talk. You know, it's the second time today that I understand things because they are so well explained. Really, your talk was adapted to all kind of attendee. Myself as a chemist, sometimes I do not understand all the physics, but now I think I understand much better than I did before. We started the collaboration on the gyroscope together, and I'm so happy that you take over and you are making big advances in the last year. And I hope that this will continue and you will soon have the first shoebox size working. So this will be a proof of concept. So now we will go to the questions. And perhaps, George, you have some question from the attendees?
We do, it works. You should use the Q&A and you'll see that your question will be featured. The first one comes from Jörg Gebhardt, and he was actually putting a very general question, which applies also to the first talk, is what do you think are the main potentials of quantum sensing in industrial use? So you presented a 5-project scale at the end on the last slide. Perhaps you relate to that on where do you see the first big potential for Bosch, or where do you think the applications are very close to our daily life?
Yes, so I think really that when you look, for example, at the magnetometer, the current magnetometer that are available on the market, they don't have a sensitivity. When you talk about room temperature magnetometers, they don't have a sensitivity that really goes down to the picotesla level per square root hertz. And when you have magnetometers available that can measure such small magnetic fields in a normal ambient environment, then this enables you really new applications that are not achievable by state-of-the-art magnetometers that are currently available on the market. So this is for Bosch. Yes, hi.
Do you have such application example for these magnetometers, or that you see that will come?
Yeah, so I mentioned in my talk briefly, for example, indoor localization or heart monitoring, or that you, or even a brain-machine interface. Okay, this is very far away, but with these NV sensors in diamond, currently, for example, for the NV sensors in diamond, they have a large dynamic range, and you can think of to fabricate this at a high volume so that you can integrate them, for example, for indoor localization really in products and use them, and they have a very small sensitivity.
Okay, second question?
Yes, the second goes in exactly this direction. It comes from Felipe Favaro, and he is asking the following: the current and perhaps even projected sensitivity of NV-based integrated sensors seems to be far from the target values that would enable application. Could you comment on the routes that could be explored to radically change the achievable sensitivity of such sensors and finally be in the required range of magnitude? Or perhaps, can you give us a timeline like Carl Williams did in the morning session when he said 25 years from now we'll have something like quantum cryptography in the cell phone or in devices which are portable? Do you think it's a 5-year, a 10-year, or what is, how can you get to this sensitivity? This would be the first question from Felipe, and how long would be perhaps an additional question from me.
So in terms of sensitivities, I think there are publications from universities, from institutes who have already demonstrated sensitivities of a few picotesla per square root hertz. So technically, I think this is possible. What now needs to be developed is the industrialization challenges, so that you scale down these techniques to a very small sensor product, and to scale up the production volumes. And currently we are in Bosch research, so now we are at the research level here, and after research there comes a phase of development, and then it goes to the market. So it's probably these products will not be within the next year on the market, but step by step, I think this is really achievable.
Yes, and then perhaps the last question, time is running, but it's very, very, very interesting. Do you see the potential of NV diamonds to be practical also for gyroscope use cases as well? So combination of NV and gyroscope? I don't know if this...
There are publications, yeah, of NV-based gyroscopes. We are aware of this, and we are really following these publications with a very high interest. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Janine. It was really a pleasure to. I can only agree with Jack. It is very nice.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, you're developing quite a sophisticated technology for the gyroscope. I mean, this is quite close to the now standard OPM sensors. I mean, couldn't you just redesign the gyroscope technology in order to sense magnetic fields?
Yeah, this is a very similar technique. I really thank you for this question. So we are in this project macQsimal. I mentioned the EU quantum flagship project. We are working together with partners, and there are other work packages and other partners working on these vapor cell based OPMs. So you can the vapor cell is considered as more or less as a platform, and you can use the vapor cell techniques for various applications. Yeah, and the gyroscope is just one of them. Magnetometers, for example, is another one. Yes, but I think we will have a talk on these OPMs later in this session here.
Yes, thank you, Janine, and thank you also for the question from our own people, which will be featured later on. So please stay tuned. We'll make a 15-minute break, but I think in the meantime we are all interested and hooked, and I welcome you all in 15 minutes from now.
I think we have a slide for that. Nicola, if you could go forward with the presentation. Here we are now for the coffee break, coming back at 15:15. And if you go, you will have during this time some sponsors slides. So our sponsors for this conference is Direct Instruments, IBM Research, LigenTec, QCit Research, and CSEM. So we'll get these slides as a waiting room. Don't be afraid, there is one mistake in the slide. So we'll be back at 15:15 and not at 10:40 as it will be written in the next slide. So see you in 15 minutes and grab a coffee and we get back in 15 minutes. Again, we remind you to ask your question in the question and answer feature at the bottom of the window. We also open the chat again, so you can either chat or send your questions, so we have both activated. Now, Sylvain will talk about macQsimal, which is related, as said, George, to the previous talks, but also to the following talks that will be concentrating on magnetometers. So Sylvain, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jacques. Thank you for this broad introduction. So yeah, as you said, I'm Sylvain Karlen. I am working at CSEM, and I will talk to you about the European project macQsimal, and in particular the quantum sensors that we're developing in this frame. So here is the agenda of my talk. I will first start with an introduction about CSEM, who we are and what are our goals and what is our mission. Then I will talk a bit about the macQsimal project and what we're doing in this frame. And I will then finish my talk about the atomic clock prototype that we're building in the project macQsimal in collaboration with our industrial partner, Aurelia Spectrotime. So CSEM, what are we? We are what we call an RTO, so a research and technology organization, and we're active in the field of technologies. Our mission is really to make technology transfer between the academic world and the industry sector. And we work as a priority with as a support to the Swiss industry. We work mostly with established companies, but our goal is also to encourage the creation of startups. In terms of numbers, here is what CSEM looks like. We have a turnover of approximately 90 million Swiss francs. We are more than 500 employees. We have more than 200 industrial partners, and we're involved in more than 80 European projects. As I was saying, we are see ourselves as a bridge between the academic and the industry world, and this also reflects in our shareholders. We are a non-profit company, and 27% of our shareholders are public institutions, and 73% are private organizations. As we try to collaborate as much as we can with the Swiss industry, we are also spread around Switzerland in 5 different locations. We have 2 different sites in Neuchâtel, where are our headquarters, and we also have local centers close to local industry in Zurich, Muttenz, Alpnach, and Landquart. The research at CSEM follows 3 main topics: precision manufacturing, digital technologies, and sustainable energy. With the quantum technologies, we are here, but of course it has connections with the other areas such as photonics, the scientific instrumentation, or the MEMS and packaging. Okay, now that you know a bit more about CSEM, I will talk about what we're doing in terms of quantum sensors, and in particular, what we do in the MicroRsystems project for which CSEM is coordinator. MicroRsystems, this stands for Miniature Atomic Vapor Cell Quantum Devices for Sensing and Metrology Applications. It's a new founded project, and it's part of the quantum flagship. It started in 2018, and it's now close to the end, as it was initially foreseen for a duration of 3 years. The project gathers 14 partners from 7 different European nationalities. There are 8 academic partners. As you can see here in orange. There are 4 SMEs and industries that are each involved in the development of one specific sensor, and 2 RTOs, CSEM and VTT in Finland, that are really serve as a bridge between the 2 worlds, the academic and the industry world. Now, the goal of the project, it's really to develop quantum sensors built around a common platform, which is the MEMS atomic vapor cell. MEMS atomic vapor cells that we're fabricating here at CSEM. In the project, the goal is to develop 5 different kinds of sensors. The first one is an atomic gigahertz and terahertz sensors and vector imagers. So this particular technology is now being transferred to the industry by the University of Basel. And there was a very interesting talk from the industry on this subject at the beginning of the afternoon by Rohde Schwarz. Then we have the miniature atomic gyroscope. The application is mostly autonomous driving. And here again, there was a very interesting talk by Robert Bosch right before the break. We have then the optically pumped magnetometers. Here, I invite you to follow the talk right after mine by our industrial partner, Megin. We have Rydberg-based trace gas sensors that are in the frame of the project, mainly developed by the University of Stuttgart. And finally, the last application, which is the miniature atomic clock. My talk will mostly focus on this last application, that we're directly developing at CSEM in collaboration with Rohde Spectrotime. So before I go into the details of the atomic clock, I'll already describe this common platform that we use for all the sensors, namely this MEMS atomic vapor cell. So what you have here is a MEMS cell made for an atomic clock, but the principle is more or less the same for the other applications. So what are they? They are made at a wafer level in CSEM clean room. And for each wafer, we produce more than 700 of these cells in each run. You have here on the right a picture of how it looks like at a wafer level. They're basically a sandwich of a glass plate, a silicon spacer with a cavity etched in the silicon, and a second glass plate to close the cavity. The cavity is filled, in our case, by an alkali metal and some buffer gas. In our case, the alkali metal is rubidium, and everything is sealed at a wafer level using anodic bonding. At CSEM, we have developed some specific features that are protected by 2 patents that are cited here. And they are the following. First, the filling method that we use at CSEM to put the rubidium inside of the cell cavity. We use rubidium azide deposited in aqueous solution inside of the cell before the bonding, and this allows us to make the whole process at a wafer level. Then we also have an aluminum oxide coating inside of the cell cavity to improve the cell lifetime. We have developed gold micro discs inside of the cell cavity. This allows to condensate the rubidium droplets that in the pictures are at the center of the cell on the gold micro discs, and this improves the clock frequency stability by preventing the rubidium to move at the center of the optical axis. And finally, we have electrical functionalization on top of the cell window that allow us to heat and control the cell temperature. So yeah, as you can see, the cells already are quite a condensate of technology. But then what we want to do with it is an atomic clock. So how do we do that? So first, we place the cell inside of a physics package. In the case of a double resonance clock, like the one I will describe here, it's placed inside of an RF antenna. And then we have a laser that crosses the cell cavity and a photodiode at the other end. And this is used to detect the rubidium absorption around its absorption lines. So the first step, once you have this, is to lock the laser frequency to one of these absorption lines. And once this is done, we apply an RF field around 3 gigahertz to the RF antenna. And this RF field frequency is generated from a quartz here on the right of the green sketch. It's generated from a quartz that is used as a local oscillator. And what we do is we lock the quartz frequency by detecting the decrease of absorption when the RF field is in resonance with the rubidium hyperfine frequency. This way, the quartz frequency is directly linked to an atomic frequency, and we have a stable frequency at the output of the quartz. So a stable output. In practice, to test our MEMS cells in a double resonance clock, what we've done is we've used commercial products from Rohde Spectrotime that you have here. It's the MRO15, which was initially working with conventional glass blunt cells, and we have modified it to adapt for our cells. Here you have some more details, so I won't go into all the details of this sketch here. But on the top right picture, you can see the MEMS cell inside of the RF antenna that here also serves as a heater for the cell. And on the bottom picture, you can see the complete physics package with the VCSEL, the cell, and the photodiode at the end. In terms of results, here are the results of 3 of these test devices in terms of long-term frequency stability. So what you can see here on this graph is the relative frequency difference of the clock with respect to the elapsed time. And in purple, you have the specification for the typical specification for a chip-scale atomic clock, which is typically to be below 10⁻11 per day in terms of drift. And as you can see here, our 3 devices were below the value after approximately 3 months of operation. And 2 of them are even close to the 10⁻12 per day after 400 days of operation. So they're asymptotical behavior. So we can conclude here that these values are comparable with the one of glass balloon cells, which validates our technology for this application. So to conclude, I've shown you the fabrication of the MEMS cells at CSEM and how they were tested in a commercial prototype. And our next and last step in the project is now to integrate this cell in a dedicated physics package in order to further improve the size, weight, and power of the clock, the commercial clock of Aurelia. And to do that, we're currently fabricating our first physics package prototype. You have a picture here. So they are based on a hybrid of the Aurelia MRO50 clock and of a flat form factor physics package that we've developed at CSEM and that is based on a patented waveguide design to have a flat form factor. So here in the center picture, you have one of these first integrated prototype that we're currently starting to test. Before I finish, I just want to thank our funding sources and our different collaborations. So Aurelia SpectraTime, ISA that has also funded quite a bit of our research in the last decade. And of course, the project MicroRsystems and the Quantum Flagship. Now, if you have questions, I think it's time for you to ask them. And feel free also to contact me directly if you have any other question, or to visit our website, CSEM and the MicroRsystems website. Thank you.
Thanks, Sylvain, for your talk. I know it very well. We work together, so it's easier for me to understand that. I will have just one question on my side, perhaps more comments. You showed the MRO50, which is the product from Aurelia SpectraTime that was launched this summer. How does it compare to the performance that we have currently on the market, for example, by the CSEM from MicroRsystems?
Well, it's a bit better in terms of performances, if I remember correctly. I think you're even more aware than I am, but it's a bit better in terms of performances than the CSEM from MicroRsystems. There's a slightly higher power consumption currently.
Yes, you're right. There is a slight increase in power consumption, but the performance and the whole door is much better. So I invite you all to have a look at the data sheet on the website of Aurelia, and you can see the performance of this first European compact atomic clock. So perhaps, George, you would have some questions for Sylvain?
Yeah, before the Q&A gets really hot, it seems that it needs a little bit of time. Please use it. It's for you. It's a feature you can use, and I think you can get a lot of details from the design and from the different features. I personally, because I'm an RF engineer, I'm interested to see what is the difficulties when you design such a compact physics in one single simple device. Do you need a lot of simulation? Do you need a lot of basically pre-working, or do you do prototyping? and hope that everything fits together. Is there additional knowledge which can be secured as IP or patents?
I think there are two difficult points in the design of this this particular device. First, the cell, because it's yeah, as I said, it's quite a bit of technologies there, and there are a lot of potential failure modes. And the other one, for the design of the physics package itself, I think it's really the thermal management that is a bit complicated, in the sense that we have to heat the cell up to more than 100 degrees or around 100 degrees. And if you want to keep a relatively low power consumption, you need to have a very good thermal management there. Maybe Jacques, you have something to add, but I think these are...
No, it's perfect, exactly that. So one thing also that we learned this morning is that from the atomic clock developments, a lot of lessons can be learned in the different fields of quantum technologies. So at some point, you make a first proof of principle, and then the engineering to get to a product, to a prototype, is very long and needs some simulation for sure. And one thing we have not to forget is the packaging. And the packaging is extremely important, especially if you want to be low cost and low power consumption. So with that, thank you very much, Sylvain, for your presentation and the answers. And we are going to the next talk. If you could go forward with the presentation, and George will make the introduction.
Yeah, thank you again, Sylvain. It is really, really interesting, especially connects very well to the morning talk. And related to the morning talk from Carl Williams, I was very curious when I saw that he presented a small company which came from Colorado or Boulder, QSpin, which is in the area of magnetometer for brain measurement, basically a very simple cap which is able to measure pretty well as he mentioned. And in the same direction, I think we should welcome Lauri Parkkonen, professor from University of Aalto, and also from Megin Oy, which was mentioned in the morning too. And it's about measuring human brain activity. Thank you. Lauri, the stage is yours.
Thank you. I hope you can see and hear me and see my presentation as well. Is it okay?
Yes, we can hear you, Lauri. All good.
Yeah, okay, good. Yes. So I will talk about how to use quantum technologies and optically pumped magnetometers to measure human brain activity. And first, I'd like to acknowledge the funding sources. This is also work that's partly conducted under this macQsimal project that Sylvain also spoke about. But it has also been supported by European Research Council and National Institutes of Health in the US. And I should mention I'm also a part-time employee of Megin Oy, although my primary affiliation is with Aalto University. So the specific brain measurement technique that I will focus on in this talk is called MEG. And since I think not all of the audience knows what it is about, so I will have some brief introduction to it. So now if we assume that we have a population of neurons that is electrically active in the brain, so denoted by this little red arrow here, so that, well, of course, generates a current distribution around it, which gives rise to a potential distribution on the scalp. And by attaching 2 or more electrodes, we can record a potential difference. And that's, of course, the EEG that has been around for about 100 years now. But of course, the currents also generate a magnetic field. The currents are tiny, so the field is really weak, but we can pick it up with sensitive enough sensors just outside of the head. And this is what MEG is about. And there are certain benefits in measuring the magnetic field instead of the potential distribution on the scalp. The main one being that we get a much better spatial resolution by recording the magnetic field instead of the electric one. And better spatial resolution means that we can localize the sources in the brain with higher accuracy. than what we could obtain by doing it based on the potential distribution measurements. So now conventional imaging systems are using superconducting squid sensors to record these weak magnetic fields. So they are typically on the order of 100 or a few hundred femtoteslas. And we have a helmet of these squid sensors around the head. And the helmet is immersed in liquid helium. And the dewar, the cryogenic dewar is then in this kind of a system. So it looks like a giant hairdryer. And the helmet is rigid, so just one size. And just to shield the whole measurement from ambient magnetic interference, the measurements are conducted in a magnetically shielded room, which is actually a pretty expensive piece of equipment, thinking about the MEG installation as a whole. Now, the MEG data, it's a multivariate time series, what we get. This is an example of the sensor signals that you get. I mean, real signals from a human head. The little spike-like things that you can see are responses to individual presentations of a stimulus. And in a conventional system, commercial one, we have hundreds of channels, 300 in the system by Megin, for example. And all these channels are typically sampled at 1 kilohertz sampling rate. So the frequency band we are typically looking at is from, say, 0.1 hertz to 100 hertz or so. Now, what we can then do with this data is that we can apply inverse modeling techniques and do source estimation. So provide an estimate of the current distribution in the brain that generated the measurements. There are certain assumptions that we have to make in order to do so, but we can reach source models as shown here on the right that show where the activity with respect to the brain anatomy occurred. And in addition to that one, we have temporal information about brain activity, which is very detailed. So we can look at the evolution of the activity millisecond by millisecond, and that's about the speed at which it occurs in the brain. So we have the time resolution that is say fully sufficient to what the brain is actually doing. So the time course down here, so that shows what happens when the person has been electrically stimulated at wrist, so stimulus to the so-called median nerve. And then we have the first cortical response at around 20 milliseconds, and then later responses after. And these are showing the location of that 20 millisecond response. Okay, so this is what's being done with squid-based MEG. But now there are certain limitations that have to do with the cryogenics involved in the squid-based MEG. And that is that we can only have this non-adaptable sensor helmet. There is also quite a large gap from the sensors to the brain, because we need to have this 2 or 2.5 centimeter thermal insulation between the room temperature region and the sensors. And this distance limits the spatial resolution that we can obtain, simply because we are taking the measurements further away from the brain. So this illustration shows an adult head in the MEG helmet. And if we quantify the distances, so the average is about 4.5 centimeters between the brain and the sensors. So now if we could have the sensors right on the scalp, as shown by these little yellow rectangles, so then the distance would drop to less than 1/2. So on average, something like 2 centimeters. And this would improve the spatial resolution and obviously give us larger signals. And I will talk a bit more about those in a quantitative manner. But now going to the actual quantum optics part. So now optically pumped magnetometers could be the sensor of choice for these so-called on-scalp MEG measurements. And the kind of OPMs of the entire family of different OPM sensor types. So what we've been using is shown schematically here. So it's a fairly simple construction, single beam operation. So we have a laser, semiconductor laser, polarizer, and then the beam goes to through a rubidium cell, and then there is a photodiode, which is measuring simply the transmissivity of the light through the cell. And this kind of an OPM would be sensitive to all field directions perpendicular to the laser beam, but in order to determine the sensitive axis, we apply field modulation. So we have a pair of coils that generate a modulation field, and so then we know that we are measuring the field component in that orientation. So these kind of sensors can be packaged into a miniature size component. So here on the right, you can see two examples. The upper one from the NIST in US, and then the lower one from this Q-spin company that was mentioned just before my talk. And these Q-spin sensors, they are the ones that we've been using so far here in Aalto University for our measurements. So before going to the actual measurements, I show some simulation work that we have done that demonstrate the potential benefits of OPM sensors in MEG. So the first one here is such that we compared a squid array and then an OPM array, so that the sensors are right on the scalp on an adult head, and then calculated that how these measurements would differ from one another. So this was done on 10 adult heads. We obtained the geometries from magnetic resonance images. So this should be pretty realistic. So now here we show the ratio of the signal strength or the norms of the signal vectors from these two hypothetical arrays. And the ratio of those is plotted on the cortical surface. The shape is a bit odd maybe, but that's because we have used techniques to sort of open up the sulci of the cortex so that you can see the entire surface at one look. So you can see that in the frontal parts of the brain here, so we get about a factor of 4 larger signals when we use an OPM array compared to a squid array. And in all parts of the cortex, the signals would be bigger, as you would assume, starting from maybe factor of 2, then going up to 4 or 5. So then we can also use other kinds of metrics. Information content is one useful metric because it captures both the spatial resolution and the signal to noise ratio. And here the graph presents a comparison of squid systems with 100 and 300 squid sensors whose sensitivity is 3 femtoteslas per square root of hertz, which is what the commercial systems are able to do nowadays. And then 4 kinds of OPM sensors with different noise levels. And now we can see from here that if we have a 10 femtotesla noise level OPM, so having 100 of those gives about the same information from brain activity as 100 squids at 3 femtotesla. So then if we can make a better OPM at 7 femtotesla, so then the information yield would be a lot higher, even if we had only those 100 OPMs. So these kind of comparisons can be made. Then it might be that the brain researcher or clinician is interested in the signal to noise ratio only. So then the picture looks a bit different. So now here we've computed the ratio of the signal to noise ratios, assuming that the squid array would be with the sensitivity of 3 femtotesla per square root of hertz, and then the OPMs at 9. And this is what the commercial OPM offerings are today. So it's a little less than 10 femtotesla. Maybe on average a bit higher, but this is what can be achieved. So now, of course, the OPMs give advantage because of being closer, but then their sensitivity is poorer. So now if we look at the entire cortical surface, so then most of that surface is still better seen by squids than OPMs in terms of signal to noise ratio alone. So now we should still improve the OPMs to actually have better signal representation from all parts of the brain. Right, so then here is a demonstration of a real measurement. So the upper part of the figure is with a squid system. And we are showing some 27 sensors now above the right somatomotor region. And the responses are those to electric stimulation of the median nerve at wrist. And then below, so the same measurement in the same individual, now with 9 OPM magnetometers. Now, if you look at the scale bars, so the signals are about 3 times larger with the OPM, so just like our simulations predicted. Now, I mentioned earlier that the spatial resolution increases as well when we can bring the sensors closer. And this is a simulation study done in the same way as the previous simulation that illustrates this fact. So the so-called point spread function shrinks by factor of 3 to 6, depending on the location on the cortex, if you switch from a squid system to an OPM system. Now, assuming that there's the same number of sensors and so forth. And here is a demonstration which, at least in part, relates to this fact. So we presented subjects with visual stimuli, this kind of a circular grating pattern that was contracting. So it was a dynamic stimulus. And then we recorded a brain activity with 9 Q-spin OPMs, as you can see in the picture here. And then also measured the same people with the same paradigm with the squid-based system. And here is a spectrum of one of the OPM magnetometers. In purple, you can see just the empty room, so no subject there. That's the sensor noise and the environment. And then if we then have the subject there, so that's the black line. So we have pronounced 10 Hertz activity, so that's the alpha activity from the brain. And then it slowly tapers off so that it's close to the sensor noise. Then if we have the stimulation on, so the alpha activity goes down as anticipated, and then we have this bump around 60 Hertz, which is the so-called gamma band activity. And here on the right, you can see the same data, but now with a time frequency plot. So we have the stimulus on from 0 to about 2 seconds. And then you can see that the frequency is around 30 and 50 something Hertz. So those are elevated while the low frequencies are suppressed. So this is an anticipated result. Here's the squid result in comparison. And now the interesting thing is that the relationship between these higher frequency increases is different with OPMs and squids. And that probably has to do with the higher spatial resolution. Right, so these were examples of studies that we have done here with OPMs. And I'm concluding with some observations. So of course it's great that we can now have sensors that we can place on the scalp. We can make sensor arrays that can really adapt to the head size and shape. What we of course can't do with squid sensors. We get larger signals, particularly from superficial brain structures. We get higher spatial resolution, and overall we can make lightweight systems that don't require any cryogenics. But there is still room for improvement. And the MicroRsystems project is addressing many of these factors. So the noise level is still 3 times higher compared to squids. So we get better SNR only for superficial brain sources. The bandwidth is limited. It's okay for most MEG applications, but there are still some which would really benefit from a wider bandwidth. The dynamic range of an open loop OPM is fairly narrow, and it requires a very low absolute magnetic field, unlike SPIDs. Thermal management is an issue with current OPMs, as Sylvain mentioned, and so is sensor robustness and lifetime. But many of these are engineering problems, so I'm quite hopeful that that we can address and provide better OPMs that would really benefit MEG in many ways. Okay, so that concludes my talk, and thank you for the attention.
Thank you, Lauri. It was really interesting for me, especially because I'm not in the field, but it's interesting to see the evolution in miniaturization and also the possibilities which open up. We have two questions now from an attendee, which is the first one relating to the fact that you can use the distance to the head to increase resolution or signal. But what
Yes.
about the distance between the sensors and the number of the different sensors you use? Is this giving you potential advantage in spatial resolution or in additional compared now to the classical technology?
Okay, that's a very good question, and we've been analyzing that quite a bit, but I just didn't have time to present those results. Yes, it would be beneficial to have more OPM sensors than SQUIDs, and this is because when the signals are closer, so then we have access to higher spatial frequencies of the field variation, and therefore it would be beneficial to have more sensors to actually measure those higher spatial frequencies. Now that, of course, goes hand in hand with the sensitivity of the sensors. So because the higher spatial frequencies typically have smaller amplitudes, so we would need to have better performing OPMs so that it would make sense to have more of those. So it's a bit sort of a complicated issue, but yes, there is room for more sensors once we can have them closer to further increase spatial resolution.
Okay, thank you, Lauri. I think we have a raised hand already from the next talk, but before, it's just a short question. Is it possible also to sense the heart activity, or is it too difficult?
No, the cardiac activity is actually easier. So it's a 10-fold larger signal, or even more than that, larger signals than brain signals. So actually, the cardiac signal is often an artifact in MEG. So yes,
it's noise.
Can I ask one question, Lauri?
Yes, sure, please.
Yeah, actually, when you do the comparison, I mean, the OPMs are typically volumetric sensors, whereas the SQUIDs are planar sensors. And have you taken this into account, or did you just dealt with it as whether they were similar?
We have taken that into account. So we have a forward model that also includes the sensitive volume as a 3D structure, not as a plane for the OPMs, that is.
Okay.
Yeah.
A last question from the audience, because before we go to the talk by Philippe Rohde, what about the bandwidths that you need, and what are the limits in terms of bandwidths?
Okay, yeah, that's also a good point. So most of the MEG signals are up to about 100 Hertz or a bit more maybe. So I would say that 90-something% of all MEG activity that people know of is less than 100 Hertz. But there are certain signals, so-called high-frequency oscillations in conjunction with epileptic spikes that may have some clinical value in the future. This still remains to be shown, but those might be important. And those are up to 200 Hertz. There's also an even higher band, maybe up to 300 Hertz. And then there are certain signals even up to 600 or 700 Hertz. But that's really a sort of a niche area of MEG. Then yeah, most of the activity is in the so-called dendrites. Then action potentials can also be measured, but that's again a more difficult thing. And I think the next speaker will address this part, because in peripheral nerves, then one is measuring a bit different activity. Although it's neural activity, but it's action potentials. So for those kind of things, we would need to have the bandwidth up to 1 kilohertz or even more.
Okay, many thanks, Lauri, for your answers.
You're welcome.
And for the talk. We are going forward with the agenda. And so it's my pleasure to welcome Philipp Rohde. He's leading the neurophysiological diagnostic, sorry for misleading that, at the Kinderspital in St. Gallen. And he will tell us how you can use these magnetometers for kids, for example. So Philipp, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Just 1 second, I need to want to share my screen. So can you see my screen?
Perfect. Perfect. You can go on.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, maybe I tell first a bit about my my background. So from training, I'm a mathematician with a specialization in theoretical physics, and I've my medical training in pediatric, and then sub-specializing in pediatric neurology. And then you might have an idea where I'm coming from and or what I want to do with all these techniques. So as a pediatrician, I'm often confronted with the point that we want to do high specific diagnosis in children, but often the methods available so far are typically designed for adults. They're typically not quite child-friendly. Most of the times they're quite painful. And this brings us often to the point where we then need to balance between what is the right diagnosis we can, what are the right diagnostic procedures we can perform in a child, and what is the real need for a child. And sometimes this is a different point, a difficult point to balance. And I will tell you about a child, and then we'll give you like a case report, and then you see how I came to the point where I said, well, the OPMs might be of great benefit to children. And given that pediatric is a whole range, you know, we're dealing with children that are newborn, so which you can see here on the far left. Might change the pointer that you can see them better. So you might consider a newborn child, which is small, which can't really move around, and then you have the child getting older, like the children then start to crawl, stand up, and finally you have the adults. And you see that for this whole range we need different diagnostic techniques, and more, we have specific diseases that affect different age groups. And I want to show you a child which was brought to us by the parents, because I brought you that video. So she was brought to us by her parents because she said, well, Emily, she was perfectly capable of crawling, actually could already stand up, but then suddenly 6 to 3 weeks ago, she started to have more and more difficulties to crawl. She lost her power in her lower legs, but also her arms, you can see it here on the video, seem to be slightly missing the power. And then actually, when as a pediatrician, you quite have a good idea what's the problem. And then the most sensitive diagnostic test you can do straight in the examination room is actually to perform a needle EMG examination. So what you can see here, you see the leg of the young girl, and then there's a needle inside the frontal tibial muscle. And on the left side, you see the activity which is recorded, even so the child is not moving her foot. So you see that the ankle joint is not moving at all, but still you have some form of activity. And this form of activity we call pathologic spontaneous activity. So the technique itself is very useful, but it had a big disadvantage. I always say, well, when you perform this examination, typically the friendship is over. I mean, this child will remember that you were still you were the one who put this needle into the leg. And so you can't really perform it as a regular test to monitor treatment. And as you probably know, that this child is stricken by SMA, so spinal muscular atrophy, and spinal muscular atrophy nowadays is treatable, and you probably have heard of. That's the most expensive drug. So Zolgensma is a drug available now to treat this condition, and there are some others like Spinraza and even more coming. But the problem is, so far, the only thing we can do to monitor the treatment success is needle EMG examination. And when I heard about the OPM sensors, and given my background in theoretical physics and mathematics, I said, well, it should be possible to really say, well, we don't perform this examination anymore, and we design a new method. You can see here the leg of the child, and you see here like a sensor. Obviously, you will recognize it as an Q-spin OPM sensor, and that we could maybe get the same information that we could get by the needle examination with this sensor without disturbing the child, without causing any harm. And that's the story I want to tell you today. So first of all, we have to look a bit into muscular physiology. So how is coupling between the nervous system, we have heard just about the brain and the activity on the brain, and the muscle, how are these two structures coupled so that we can perform voluntary movements? And critical for that is that you have like here a nerve coming into close proximity of the muscle, and then this information is transferred by the neuromuscular end plate onto the muscle. And then the tricky thing is now for the muscle needs to contract at all parts at the same time. If you would consider that the muscle only contracts at the very proximal part, so very close to the body, but the distal parts would not contract, then you couldn't do any movement, because simply the muscle would lengthen at areas where it's not contracting and would shorten in areas where it's contracting. And therefore, the nature has designed a more or less general principle. And this is, and you see it here as this yellow clouds moving, you have an electric activity that is quickly, about 5 meters per second, moving along the whole muscle fiber. So if you consider, for instance, the arm, and you have the biceps muscle, you have this length, the neuromuscular end plate is roughly here. Well, sorry, is roughly here. And then this activity is propagating into this and this direction, and you can move your arm. And this is the core principle. And I bring it to you in a bit more scientific perspective. So you have here the neuromuscular end plate, you have a membrane potential, and this membrane potential is shown here as a graph. And at the location where the muscular action potential is generated, this potential quickly changes from minus 90 millivolt to plus 30 millivolt, and then repolarizes. And in conjunction with this change in voltage, you have a current flowing in the longitudinal direction. And I show you a video here. You see how the muscular action potential propagates from the left side to the right side. So you see here the muscle, and then you see how this muscular action potential propagates along the muscle. And this way, the information that the muscle needs to contract is this spread all over the muscle. And at the same time, of course, when you consider that you have a voltage gradient in the longitudinal direction, you have also a current flowing into this longitudinal direction. And if you take both of these considerations together, obviously the current flowing in the longitudinal direction will create a magnetic field around the fiber. I mean, the Biot-Savart law nicely tells us even how this signal should look like. So you see here a model of the magnetic field we would expect to see from the outside of this propagating muscular action potential. And that was, I think, 2015 or so, where we thought, well, we should at least try if we can record the signal at all. And that's when we used the Q-spin sensors, the Q-spin OPM sensors, to bring the sensors in close proximity of the hand and to see, I show it here on the next slide, to see if we can record the activity of the small hand muscles. So when you see the hand, you have several muscles. You have muscles around your thumb, you have muscles inside your hand, and then you have muscles close to the small fingers. And ideally, you should see the muscular activity if you stimuli the supplying nerve. So either the median nerve or the ulnar nerve. So median nerve in yellow and ulnar nerve in green. And that's actually what we could show, that when we stimulated the median nerve, we could see this propagating muscular action potential inside the hand and close to the palm. And this observation then gave rise for a further experiment, which we conducted about a year ago, where we said, well, if we can record it from the hand, then we should also be able to record it from the foot. And actually, we chosen the small but very linearly running abductor hallucis, this muscle here. And the advantage of this muscle is it runs perfectly straight. And so you can place 4 sensors along the muscle. And ideally, what you would see that you could really record a flipping of the signal, because you would expect that the neuromuscular end plate is located here. Then you have one muscular action potential propagating towards the big toe, and then you have a second muscular action potential propagating to the heel. And that's actually what we designed this experiment for. We placed 4 OPMs, actually specifically looking at sensor T and U, and wanted to see whether we see a flipping of the signal. And that's actually what we could record. You see here the signal and the simulation. So red is the signal, and we recorded in 2 directions. As you remember, the OPM sensors of QSpin, the first version is able of recording the Y and Z direction, but it's so far not able to record the X direction as well. The new generation actually can. And what you can see here, this is the Y direction of this sensor, and this is the Z direction of this sensor. And then this is the Y direction of this sensor and the Z direction also of this lower sensor. And when you closely look, you see that the Y direction is flipping and the Z direction is also flipping. This tells you that the current must flow into this direction for the upwards propagating and in this direction for the downwards propagating action potential, which is shown here in green and in green as well. So this information is really crucial and brings us also quite a bit closer to our goal, because now we know quite precisely that the neuromuscular end plate is located here. So in addition to the pure dynamic information, we get also anatomical information about the localization of important structures of the neuromuscular system. And this gave rise to the next experiments we designed. So instead of eliciting the contraction by electric stimuli, we designed a non-magnetic hammer. You see this hammer here. And then we elicited a monosynaptic stretch reflex. So if you stretch a muscle quite quickly and firmly by a hit to the tendon, then the muscle will react by a short contraction. And this is actually what we used in order to measure the activity of the rectus femoris muscle, which is located here. This is a muscle you need to move your leg forward. And you see here, then we place several sensors along the muscle. And then when you look closely, you see here, we put in addition needle electrodes, because so far the pathologic spontaneous activity is well characterized using electric recording, but it's not characterized for magnetic recording. So we needed to have an understanding of how does the signal look like, how does the magnetic signal compares to the electric signal. And that's actually what I show you on the next slide. Sorry, that's flipped around. That's what I'm showing here on this slide. And I will tell you exactly what you see. we recorded the activity of the hammer. The hammer had a photodiode in front, so we could exactly determine the moment the hammer hits the skin. This is shown in green. And then we recorded the X and Y direction of the OPM sensors. And in addition, we recorded the electric activity of the needle electrode between the first two sensors. And what you can see here in blue, you see the electric activity, and it's normalized to the time point 0, which is roughly 10 milliseconds after the hammer hits the skin, which fits quite well because the information of the stretching of the tendon goes all the way to your spine, and then the motor neuron is activated and the information goes back down to the muscle, and then you see the propagating muscular action potential. And what you see quite nicely is how closely the muscular action potential can be recorded by the OPM device, and in addition it can be recorded by the electric device. This shows us that we can well compare the magnetic and the electric activity. But indeed, it gives us even more information, and that's what I want to show you here. So we have placed in total 4 OPM sensors, and these OPM sensors are here shown as small boxes, here and here. And as you know, the magnetic field is a vectorial, has vector components, and these vector components not only tell you the location, but also tell you the propagation direction. And you see here the muscular action potential here is propagating in an angulated fashion, and the more you come close to the knee, the more it runs straight, and which fits perfectly well, given that a muscle is not simply like a straight line, but it has an angulation, which we call pineation angle. And that's what we can record. And this is, again, even much more information than we can get with the OPMs, than we can get by electric recording. And now we were ready to perform the critical experiment. And this was, we wanted to see whether we can record pathologic activity in a patient suffering from a motor neuron disease. And obviously we started to record by recording from an adult, and there we did the following experiments. Again, we placed 4 OPM sensors along the rectus femoris muscle, and then we placed EMG needles. And then you see the needle EMG activity here, which is clearly a pathologic activity. And then we did parallel recording. So you see here, you have the fasciculation you can record with a needle EMG. And then you have here the signal from the OPM, which also shows you exactly where you can record the pathologic activity. And this was the first proof of principle that in general, we are able to record pathologic activity, and even we can record much more because we are not only getting the functional, but also the anatomical information. And obviously this has been published in several publications over the last years. And now actually we kickstarted a great program together with the DLR in Germany, and it's now University of Tübingen and the PTB do the main work. And I mean, coming back to the questions regarding the difficulties of getting EU funding, I mean, this is just another example how difficult it's now to participate in such big programs from Switzerland. But I hope in the near future we are able to design new collaborations. Thank you very much. I'm open for questions.
Thank you very much, Philippe. I think we could listen to you for hours because it's so exciting to see these sensors being used in the real applications. And you do a great job for showing the potential of these sensors. Time is running, so I think we would have time for one question. But for sure, if you have more questions, please contact Philippe or contact us. We can relate the question to him. Basically, Philippe, these sensors that you are using are the QSpin one. If you would have a wish list, what should a new magnetometer do better than the QSpin one?
I think bandwidth is the most critical part. I mean, when you really want to precisely record the propagating muscular action potential, then you would like to have a bandwidth in the kilohertz range, and 150 is pretty small. I mean, one thing on the wish list was that we get a triaxial sensors. Actually, QSpin just delivered these triaxial sensors, but the next thing definitely would be to have a higher bandwidth. And the other thing is obviously that you need quite good shielding. And if we could have like sensors that would operate in the Earth magnetic field, this would be fantastic.
Thanks, Philip. Perhaps, I don't know if Lauri is still online and he can activate his microphone. I just had a comment this morning. There was Carl Williams from NIST showing us some results from kernel, showing the first results they measured with magnetometer in a single shielded room. So meaning a room you can enter with a corridor and you don't feel like oppressed by the shielding. Lauri, if you are online, do you think the sensor that we might develop might achieve same results? Not sure Lauri is still with us. Anyhow, so this is a target, and as I said, kernel showed that it seems to be feasible to be in a single shielded room, and we hope that we can achieve such results also with the magnetometer that we are.
Jacques, now I'm able to speak again. I was promoted to be a panelist again.
Okay, sorry.
Yes.
So did you listen did you get the question?
Yes, I did.
So what do you think about the ability that we might have with the developed sensors, so developed OPM regarding measurement in single shielded room or even in not shielded rooms?
Yes, so the kernel shielded room, so that's a sort of a walk-in type of thing. So then it has a like a labyrinth kind of entrance. So I don't know what's the residual field inside, but with some coils, it is possible to bring it down to the level of surf OPMs. But of course, there are other OPM types that can record at much higher ambient fields, about up to date. So then the problem has been that their sensitivity is so much poorer that they are not good for MEG or for measuring peripheral nerve activity. But there are some promising candidates now that could perhaps fulfill these wishes.
Because I mean, if we want to use them one day in the clinical setting, obviously, I mean, we have our clinical laboratories. They have some form of shielding for the electric recording, so we have no 50 hertz effectance, for instance, because they are shielded for that. But we don't have any further special shielding, and therefore it would be really necessary to have sensors that are capable to work in minimal shielded rooms.
Yes. There are some, the so-called scalar magnetometers that can operate at Earth's field. Their sensitivity, the record that I know of is somewhere around 30, 40 femtotesla per square root of hertz, which is already pretty good. And that might be useful for many of the things that you presented. The problem is that then they are recording along the direction of the Earth's field, and there is nothing one can do about that. So then for some applications, this is a problem. For MEG, for example, you do not want to record along the Earth's field at every position around the head.
Thanks very much for this answer. I think we have to go on, and for sure you can continue discussing among you. Now we are going to the next step of this session. Nicola, if you could give me the possibility to advance. Okay, here we are. Now we have the live industry tour. So we are all eager to listen and to see real things. So our startups showing what they are doing in their own facility. And this was set up by George. George is mastering that, so he will introduce them, and we are looking forward for these live tours.
Thank you, Jacques. I think there's not a lot to say that 5 years ago when I started all these names were just like small seeds, or perhaps in a stage of not even being a seed. And now a QSeed looks back and sees companies with spaces, with people behind. So I just leave the stage now to the company. We start with QZabre, and then we go through LigenTec, Qnami, MicroRsystems, and we can continue. But I think the time will run out at 5. Please enjoy it. Thank you.
There is 10 minutes per company, I guess.
10 minutes per company. I think we start with Gabriel.
Gabriel, the stage is yours.
Great. Cool. Thank you, George, for organizing Quantum Industry once again. We've been here a couple of times now, actually every time. It's always really cool. And my name is Gabriel. I'm CEO of QZabre, and I look forward to doing an 8-minute brief tour of what QZabre looks like and try to give you a feel of what we do, why we do it, show you some instrumentation, and do some quantum measurements. So at QZabre, everything revolves around magnetic fields. And the question, of course, is why care about magnetic fields? And on the one hand, there's fundamental research, which is always interesting. And they also make very, very nice pictures. So this is actually a picture of the Magellan Cloud in space, but we're rather more interested in the nanometer scale than the space scale. So why care about nanometer magnetic fields? You want your phone to last longer. That means we need more efficient computers. And the way to go for that is actually to use magnetic materials. And we all know that chips are nanometer scale. So what we need is the tools for R&D to do nanometer magnetic field characterization. And this ties into what we actually do here at QZabre, and this is scanning NV microscopy. So we have our NV, or nitrogen vacancy center, as an atomic scale magnetic field sensor. We bring it close to the surface. We read out optically, we excite with microwaves, then we scan very closely over surface, and this gives us great spatial resolution and very high sensitivity. What it's typically used for, as you might have guessed, is actually mapping out magnetic fields. Both key aspects are that it's quantitative, that we can spatially resolve very tiny features. But what I would like to stress today is that we can also use this as a qubit. And manipulating it as a qubit allows us to do time resolved measurements. It allows us to do relaxometry. It allows us to do noise spectroscopy. So there's a lot to be gained by moving over to kind of qubit type measurements, and we'll demonstrate those. In addition, we have more things that we can do, electric field measurements. We can do current tracing, current densities, things like that. I think the list will go on in the future, but let's move ahead towards what the system actually looks like. So our QSM, our quantum scanning microscope, looks pretty much like this. Maybe we can move a little bit even further. The base is a commercial AFM. Inside, we actually have our own vector electromagnet, but you'll have to take my word for that. Then we have sample stage here. We have microwave electronics here. And like the crucial part of such a system is the optics, which we developed here in-house, optimizing it for performance, opting it for maximum sensitivity. We put a lot of engineering in, and it's performing very, very well. And what else you need is obviously you will need a little bit of electronics. So this is a second system. See the electronics in the back. This is our own housing. So we have temperature stability. But I think we want to head over to Andrea, who is our CTO. There we go.
Hello, everyone. Camera is set up. Hope you can hear me. I'm Andrea, and I'm very excited to give you a short demo on our QSM microscope today. And as Gabriel already mentioned and others today, NV sensors are great not only for scanning magnetometry, but also for a plethora of other applications in the quantum realm. And it is really the case because they are stable qubits at room temperature. And the QSM microscope can manipulate the property of the qubit. So let's get onto it. And I want to show you a couple of measurements live that can be done. We will set up the camera so that we can see the screen. That looks good, where I have pre-aligned one of our scanning probes under our confocal microscope. We offer probes in different sensitivities and with different NV orientations to our customers, depending on their needs. Here the NV is the brightest spot in the center of the scan, and we can track and optimize the collection efficiency of our optical system around it by moving it in 3 dimensions. And the NV at this point can really be thought as a simple 2-level system with a characteristic energy spacing. And that energy spacing can be measured by sweeping the microwave frequency while detecting the fluorescence from the NV, which is what is happening now on this side of the screen. At a certain specific frequency, we can see a dip in fluorescence, which indicates that energy of the qubit. Now that we know this energy of the qubit, we can use it to manipulate its internal states. For example, by driving coherent oscillations between the ground state and the excited state, and back in what is mostly known as a Rabi measurement, which is now also running on this side of the screen, where you see the characteristic Rabi signal. The QSM can measure much more than just these protocols, but with a short amount of time I have, I'd like to hand back the camera to Gabriel, which will finish the company tour.
Okay, so heading back, like once again, I want to stress, like it's really the key. The pulse measurement techniques is really what's going to open up new applications, new data at the nanometer scale for customers. And it's really a key point that we're working very hard on to push. What I haven't shown you so far is that, of course, we work a lot on making the software much easier to use so that a non-expert can use it, because we want this to go as easy as an atomic force microscope in the future. This is kind of where we're headed. Let me talk a little bit about QZabre itself. We were founded in 2018 as a spin-off, so 5 years ago we didn't even exist. We started off making the scanning diamond tips. We use government funding and revenue to drive the development of our system, because we saw a market demand for this kind of system. Started selling systems last year. This year we're really happy. We won the SLICE Quantum Challenge. We're now a team of 10 people. With a revenue of about 2 million Swiss francs for this year, hoping to increase this significantly more next year. This is kind of the end of the tour. We didn't show you fab facilities because they're not here on site, but this is our new office, and I really look forward to hearing from you. If you're interested in collaborations, if you're interested in jobs, internships, master thesis, drop us a line, and I look forward to hearing back from you.
Thank you, Gabriel. It's really like, Jacques, it's a pleasure to see what started last year as one pitch, one company, which you'll see later on. And now I see this incredible spot space at QZabre, and it's a pleasure also to see inside of these developments, which are that short in time, but that intensive in manpower, initiative, force, entrepreneurship. Thank you, Gabriel, for that.
Now we are turning to the next one. So next one is LigenTec, and we have Michael or Michael online. I think, Michael, you can take over and share your video, and then we'll put you on highlights.
Yes. Can you see me? It seems
we can hear you, and we can see you.
Good, great.
Perfect.
Good. So I'm talking the next 10 minutes about LigenTec. At LigenTec, we do photonic integration and photonic integration for different applications. One of the applications is quantum, and I want to start to show what photonic integration is and what it means in terms of scalability. So let me quickly probably first show a setup. So photonic integration is supposed to miniaturize all of that setup. into a chip, which is the size like that. So that's here's my finger. So that's really a miniature size of a chip, and we have that here on a camera that we see here on the screen. So we can have different components on a chip. That here, for example, we have a splitter where a 50-50 beam splitter where we come in. So that's a size of a few microns. Here we have a so-called arrayed waveguide grating where we come in with different wavelengths, and then the wavelengths are splitted and then are separated into different channels, which is important, for example, for telecommunication. To split the different wavelengths, and we have all kinds of different components here that different kinds of splitters, and on that very tiny chip that we can see here. And how is the chip fabricated? Well, this is fabricated on a wafer scale level, and on a wafer we can fit many of those chips on one wafer that we see here, and these wafers can be produced in parallel, where we have them as batches of up to 25-50 wafers per run, where we can then fabricate many of these wafers, and then many of these chips to perform, for example, quantum simulations, quantum computing, or other applications such as telecom and even LiDAR sensors. So what we do here is that we fabricate the devices, and we recently announced a partnership with a big CMOS fab, X-Fab, that scales the whole process to volume, and then we test these chips here in house, where we have a bit of an optics setup to test the chips. We have several lasers to check if the quality control of these chips is good. What we do with these chips is, as I said, is not only telecommunication and quantum. We have many different application areas. Here we have, for example, one highlight that we last year got with a company Xanadu. So that made it on the cover of Science Advanced, where we fabricated a chip for them where they actually do two-photon pair generation on a chip, and here you see all the components that they use. So again, that chip that is the same size that I just showed in the lab. The chip is the size of 5 by 5 millimeters, and on these 5 by 5 millimeters, you can generate several quantum states and even operate them as a multi-qubit quantum computer. So the key part is that tiny ring, where they use squeezing to generate the quantum states, and in these rings, then the two different photons are generated, and they pass then in their interferometer, and in the interferometer, actually they can then control the quantum states and do computations in these quantum states. But there's other applications such as LiDAR, or even for space industry. We can have the chips in satellites for optical communication and QKD and quantum communication in space. So the application space is huge for these chips. One of very promising one is quantum, and we're looking forward to push that even more. So we started a bit more than 5 years ago. Are now a team of almost 30 people, and just recently announced that the partnership with a big CMOS fab, where we assure the scaling of these devices for quantum LiDAR and space technologies. With this, I thank you very much and encourage you to ask me questions afterwards per chat or per email.
Thank you, Michael. This is really incredible to see the lab space 4 years ago, when we were like walking around and taking a look at the simple and discussing about what possible coupling in and PICs can be done. And you have here a huge company connected to the entire European fabrication with X-FAB and featuring things which I would have not thought that you will be in the quantum computing business, as well as LiDAR, as well as being the platform offering these options. I think this is it's amazing. I'm every time I'm looking, it's like unbelievable. So once more, thank you. And the next one is the first one from last year, which introduced this kind of sessions. And I think this is it's a merit, and I hope we can continue with Quantum Industry Day and have all the time this kind of featuring of companies. And the stage is now Qnami.
Hi, welcome everyone. And here we are at Qnami, and my name is Lucia, and I will guide you through our tour today. So as some of you might already recall, we are starting now where we ended last year in our application lab, where we welcome our customers and we show them our flagship product, Qnami Produce Q. Qnami Produce Q is a scanning ND microscope, and with it you can measure material properties such as magnetic fields with atomic precision. But as you can see, I'm not alone here, and I have here my colleagues, Kai and Alex, that were about to start a measurement with Produce Q. So thanks a lot for having us here. Alex, can you tell us a bit more about what can you do with Produce Q actually?
Sure, I can try. So the central field of application for the Produce Q still actually remains, the investigation of small magnetic fields, real magnetic fields at a very tiny scale. And here we can actually really look at the investigation on, or essentially separation of two techniques. So one would be really the characterization of new magnetic materials, 2D materials, or it can also be the investigation and actually qualifying of new magnetic devices. And I mean, one of these magnetic devices you potentially know is called the MRAM, it's magnetic random access memory. And the overarching goal of that journey is essentially to reduce the energy consumption of the future computing devices. And in the end, by that, at the same time, to also reduce the footprint, so making it really small at the end. So energy consumption reduction and footprint smaller. And to give you just a tangible understanding what I mean by that, let's have a quick look in how that actually looks in real life. So what you right now see is now where Philippe is actually showing to you, it's a chip. And what I mean by characterization of these new chips, it will be essentially a failure analysis. So here what we can now do is we can measure a chip while it is operating. And while it is essentially operating, you can actually measure its properties. This is kind of a very key feature of what current technology requires.
And this sounds like a new feature, right? And so are you working on even new additions and other developments for Qnami ProtosQ?
Indeed, actually, this module is brand new, so this is kind of almost so we released this already. But among other measurement nodes, which mostly aim to reduce your noise and essentially increase your signal, we have actually now almost finished the launch of a new measurement node, which should exactly give you the same quality of data, but increase your measurement speed by the factor of 50.
Wow.
So stay tuned.
That's incredible.
Stay tuned, and you will see
and
more.
So a lot has happened on the product side. What can you tell us about the company side?
Oh yes, I mean, it's now 1 year we have been from the last year. Exactly, and our company here has almost now been doubled. I mean, we are right now almost kind of running out of space, starting from 8 people back 1 year ago, and now are actually reaching almost 50 people. So this is kind of almost double in size. And of course, the other aspect is that we closed this year, our Series A financing round. That we would be able to solidify our ProtosQ business there, and also be able to extend our technology, to different fields.
Yeah.
And
so yes, this is exactly what I would like to talk about now. So, but just let me grab Gediminas from our production lab. Hey, Gediminas. Hi. Hello. So, would you actually like to talk about the novel applications that we are developing right now? So I see that you have already prepared
a slide for us to talk about developments at Qnami. So here at Qnami, currently we are focusing on answering the question, how can we actually enable semiconductor industries to make better devices? Over the last few decades, the speed and performance of computer chips mostly increased because of the downscaling of electrical components in them by following this famous Moore's law. But so that means that the number of transistors in the same chip had been doubled every 2 years. However, this trend is now facing its own limits, and new solutions need to be found. So like changing architectures of the chips or investigating new materials. And here comes a challenge for industries that are making these chips to do failure analysis or quality control of their processes. So far we had the magnetic field sensor and Proteus Q system that could help to image magnetic properties at the nanoscale. But what we found out that there is another key parameter for failure analysis, which is temperature. And as here you see in this thermal image of the chip, so red color indicates high temperature regions. Operating chip produces heat, and then heat can be used to troubleshoot the chip, like if there are some problems with heat management or detect some failing components in that chip. So, however, since it's nanoscale, now there is a need to have temperature method to characterize and yield this temperature information at the nanoscale. And here comes few requirements from industry to be able to do that. So first of all, this technique should be able to do imaging, like creating a map of the chip to identify hotspots on a chip. The resolution should be something like sub-100 nanometers to really address each individual element on that chip. Of course, the measurement should be quantitative and high sensitivity to really get reliable data. And looking from the operation point of view, the operation should happen at room temperature and should not need any calibration, or very easy calibration.
So this sounds like a lot of requirements, but so do you know if nowadays actually a technique exists that fulfill all these requirements? Is it possible?
Yes, so that's a good question. So there are a lot of requirements, and till now, there is no technique that will address all of them simultaneously. So there are some state-of-the-art techniques that could address like few of them, but none of them offer full package. However, we are developing the new diamond sensor based on our core NV technology that would allow us to measure temperature at the nanoscale. So now we move to characterization lab, where our engineers are actually characterizing this new device. And yeah, you can take a look there.
That sounds super exciting. So thanks, Gediminas, for this nice introduction. Let me guide you in the KER lab where the magic happens, actually. So as you can see, I'm wearing the overshoes. Give me 1 second. I will follow now. Maybe Felipe can give me the camera, and I will guide you through the curtain. Voila. So here I am in the KER lab where we assemble and characterize our tips. So Marcelo, thanks for having us here. Gediminas already introduced us to these novel sensors that we use for scanning NV thermometry. Would you like to tell us a bit more about this?
Yeah, well, here actually you can see a batch of the sensors we developed. So we really wanted to leverage on the existing platform we had, so on our atomically precise AFM and the hardware and the software we developed. So to be able to do that, we thought for thermometry, we would just radically change the sensor, because the current ones we would have some difficulties in sensing temperature with the sensitivity and the resolution that is required. So together with our collaborators at the University of Montpellier, we changed the sensor. As you can see, we changed the design, we changed the density of NVs that you would have on the tip, their position to be able to use them in the platform we have right now. So with the sensors here, we would assemble them just the same way as we would have on our magnetic field sensors, and then just plug it in our Proteus Q, and there you go, be able to sense temperature.
That's very nice. I'm super happy that you actually shared with us these developments, and I have to say that the entire team is quite proud of, very proud of these developments, as this is the first time ever that scanning NV thermometry is tested and established. So it's a very nice step forward for the entire company. And with Marcelo, I would like to thank actually all the other colleagues that participated in the tour, and all of you that joined us for this nice journey. I hope you enjoyed it. And for any of you who would like to push the frontiers with us, you can check our career page. We would be happy to have you here. Thanks a lot.
Ciao.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Lucia, Qnami team, Felipe holding the camera. I think every time it's again something surprising, and it's like temperature this time. And I could not even vision 5 years ago that we have two companies, two different setups, and such an unbelievable development. And of course, you shared also some knowledge in the parallel session about entrepreneurship. Just go into the videos, take a look at, and if not, knock at the door and ask about Qnami. And not before we end our sessions of today, we have another one of our startups. It's MicroRsystems. Started very early in the fourth year from taking a look back, and I think Maxim will show us where they're heading from.
Hi, can you hear me? Can you see me?
Perfect. Your floor.
Ah, cool. So hi, my name is Maxim, and so I'm going to give you today a live lab demo of what is going on in MicroR and what we are doing. So our core expertise is optical frequency comms, and in particular microresonator-based optical frequency comms. So we will start here at the whiteboard, and then move like through the lab to see our setups and also our systems. So let me start with the brief explanation of what is an optical frequency comm. So it's an optical source, which spectrum consists of a series of equidistantly spaced optical lines shown here. And these optical lines, this spectrum can be described with a very simple expression containing just two parameters. One is the repetition rate frequency, it's the spacing between adjacent comb lines, and the offset frequency, which corresponds to this, the offset of this frequency grid with respect to the zero frequency. When all of these optical frequencies of the comb have certain phase relationship, in time domain, it corresponds to the optical pulse train. where the phase of the carrier wave slips with respect to the optical envelope. And basically the main cool feature of the optical frequency comps is that they're able to provide a phase coherent link between these optical frequencies and these two frequencies in RF domain, which you can actually directly measure. So this feature actually helps optical comps to be used for the measurements, for the precise measurements of optical frequencies. There's a lot of different applications of the optical comps. In particular, they are used for optical clocks, for precise stabilization of lasers using quantum applications, and beyond this for the spectroscopy, ranging, astronomy, and many, many other applications. The conventional way to build an optical comp is based on either fiber lasers or solid-state mode-locked lasers, which actually leads to often quite large systems, and also it limits the potential of the frequency spacing, this repetition rate spacing of these optical comps. And it turned out that there is another way to create these optical comps, to generate these optical comps using optical microresonators. So what is an optical microresonator? It's a very tiny, millimeter or micrometer sized cavities which are able to confine light inside them using the effect of total internal reflection. So here I've actually one of these microresonators. I'll bring it maybe closer to the camera. So it's a glass piece, and that you have, maybe you can see the small protrusion around this glass piece. So this is essentially the microresonator and where the light can be stored. And the light can go, can circle around this microresonator for billions of times because of this high quality, because of the high quality factors of these microresonators. So if you have such a high quality microresonator and you drive it with just a single frequency continuous wave laser, what is happening is that just so you can hear on this, you can see on this on the scheme. So if you just drive it with the continuous wave laser, due to this high quality and intrinsic nonlinearity of the microresonator, you can actually start to access some nonlinear processes. And the most important of them is the Fourier mixing, which essentially destroys the two pump photons at the pump at the laser frequency and start to generate two new photons at the new frequencies. So the new frequencies are building up in a KER-Zentrum eigenmodes. And essentially what is happening is that at the end you have a broadband optical frequency comp with exactly equidistant line spacing. These comps are called KER comps or microresonator based comps. And this is what we are developing here at MicroR. Two main features of these microcomps is that they're extremely compact, as you can see, and they provide access to very large frequency spacing from 10 gigahertz to up to terahertz. But one of the most coolest features of the microcomps is that, in fact, the optical microresonators which can be used for them are not only these crystalline ones, but you can also use the silicon photonics to create optical microresonators for the optical comps. And we can move to the next spot. So here we have actually a silicon chips, which each of them contains the tens of the optical microresonators. And each of them can produce the optical frequency comp. So essentially these chips can be mass fabricated, mass manufactured in the silicon photonics foundries. And actually LigenTec was talking about silicon nitride. This is exactly chips made out of silicon nitride. And actually we have the bit closer picture of one of these chips. And this is actually the picture of the chip which was fabricated by LigenTec. So here we have the microresonators, these small rings. So it's just a waveguide circled in the form of a ring. We have a coupling waveguide which which provides the light inside this microresonator, and here the edge of the chip, and you can approach with the lens with some fiber to launch the light inside this microresonator. So now let's move to the setups. So the first thing which I'm going to show you is one of the sort of laboratory grade setups which are used to launch the microresonator, to launch the optical frequency comp in one of the microresonators. So here you can see like one of the, again, laboratory grade setups. And actually if you approach closer here in the middle under the light, you can, I hope that you can see the small, one of the chips, one of the silicon chips, which is used to generate optical comp. So on the left and on the right, we have some fibers coming in. And as you can see, the setup actually is quite big. So we have a laser there, we have an amplifier, we have other equipment to prepare the light going into the chip and then to distribute it between different equipment and measure it. And as you can see, actually it takes about like several cubic meters of equipment to just launch an optical frequency comp in this actually very, very small silicon chip. So our core expertise, with our expertise at MicroR, we can actually squeeze and make the very compact system based on this silicon chip to create to make a turnkey optical frequency comms based on this MicroRsystems. So now we have here actually one of our systems which we are assembling for our customer. So actually now you can see that it's just a very small breadboard, maybe about 30 by 30 centimeters, and we have here all the equipment needed to launch an optical frequency comp in a microresonator and stabilize it. So we have a laser here, amplifier, we have a control electronics for the diodes for stabilization. And after this all be assembled, we will move this system inside our chassis, which is essentially like rack-mounted system, which will be shipped to one of our customers. Well, okay, this is cool, but what would be the next step? In fact, as you can see here, we have still a lot of free space which we can further condense it. And if you actually remember from my initial presentation, initial part of like slides on the whiteboard, is that the only thing which you need for the optical comp using this microresonator is essentially the microresonator plus a laser. And in fact, so our next step is to move even to smaller systems, which I'm going to show you here. So what you can use is you can use an optical chip on a mic. You can use just the optical microresonator on the chip, plus a very, very tiny DFB laser, which power is enough to launch an optical microcomp. So by packaging two of these elements together, you can also create, and we already demonstrated that you can create an optical frequency comp, and you can package them in a butterfly size system like shown here. And with already this system, such optical microcomps can be integrated into larger systems. They can be used for a number of applications like generation of optical microwaves, for telecom applications, for spectroscopy, and many others. So I think that's it, and I hope you like it. Let me know if you have any questions. This is MicroR.
Thank you very much, Maxime.
Thank you, Maxime.
We got a good insight of what you're doing. We also know that you are partially working at CSEM, so it's a great pleasure to have you here. And all the live tours, they were very helpful for us because we have this virtual meeting and this brings us to you. And this was the goal of these live tours. So I thank very much the 4 startups making it possible. And I have to conclude. So we are on time. So I also have to say, I have to thank all the speakers and the live tours. You all maintain your time slots. We are finishing right on time. Now, the only thing I can tell you that we enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed it too. What you see on the screen is a save the date. So next year, we hope to welcome you in Zurich, perhaps again at Technopark here at Zurich Instrument Facilities, and save the date in your agenda, the 4th of October 2022. We should welcome you here. Last but not least, if you can put me on spotlights, please, Nicola. I would like to thank the organization committee of KIDIS that helped us organizing that, parallel sessions. Technically, it's worked very well. And the last thing I would like to do, I do my own industry tour. Industry tour is here, so I'm going to take the camera. And the people working in the backstage, they are just here. And they are here, you know, don't hide yourself. You have Nicola, you have Maya, and behind you have Beatrice. So without them, this would not be possible. So thank you very much. I'm coming back. I hope I'm not too bad in the screening. So this was my live tour. Thank you very much for joining, and see you hopefully next year. Bye-bye.
Bye.